right, welcome back to NostalgiaCast. I'm Jonny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
And we like to take movies that we saw as kids, watch them again as adults, and see how they hold up. And we have a guest today, and he chose our movie today. So our movie today is Neverending Story. But before we get into it, let's do a recap of last week.
Okay. We talked about, it was our annual Halloween episode. I noticed that you took down all your decorations, but you still got your Halloween candy up? Is that what that is above your head?
The candy's now in the jars, so that's where the candy went.
Okay, so we're slowly returning to normalcy. Anyway, we've got a bunch of craziness going on in the country right now. If that gives anybody an indication of what night we're recording this on, but we're trying to put that aside and try to focus on what's fun. And so last week, just trying to get our heads back into it. We talked about Return to Oz, 1985, an existential nightmare fuel of a movie is what everybody called it. It was my choice. So how we came down on that, actually, how do you feel? How was our conversation? Do you think it went well? Do you think we got a lot of stuff?
Yeah, I thought we covered a lot of good ground. I thought it was worth remembering. So does you, I think. And I overall enjoyed it, but I made the point I don't need to watch it again. And you brought up points that you saw as a kid and how it scared you when you were a kid, the Mombi scenes and all that. But I think the overall the world building and everything about that movie was really well done. I mean, they sold us on the world building and what they were trying to do. So it did its job in that regard. But overall, an enjoyable movie. And like I said, we both thought it was worth remembering. So yeah, I think we did well with that one.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions that I've been encountering on Twitter today, or the last couple of days, is somebody asked, what is a movie that you admire that you would never watch again, a movie that you loved? And a lot of people said stuff like Schindler's List or, Apocalypse Now, stuff like that. That's really tough to take. Grave of the Fireflies, anime movie. It's really tough to take. And when I thought about it, something like Schindler's List is a very tough movie to watch, but I will go back to that every so often because I admire the technique and the craft that went into it. I'm just in awe of the way Spielberg put that together. And with Return to Oz, what we're talking about, and I agreed with you about not, we got it. There's no need to watch it again. I think the technical prowess is there. Walter Murch is obviously he made a statement, and the movie was about something, and it was unique. But I think that's where we did agree there, is because it was very well done. It was very persuasive, but we got everything we needed to get out of it. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think there are some movies that are just, maybe that's why we don't go back to these movies, because we get all we need from them? Is that why?
Yeah. An example I can think of talking about this subject is when you first showed me the movie Memento. Like I had a visceral reaction to it, and I wanted to watch it again, like right away. Like I wanted to watch it like back to back to back. And I started doing that. I actually went and got it as soon as I could. I started studying it, and I started like just really getting into that movie. And it really affected me in a certain way. And this one didn't do that. Like I still appreciate everything that I saw. I took it all in. I enjoyed it, but I don't need to study it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's there. It does its job. It's just not something that, like we talked about with Star Wars as well, it's not something that's going to be a lasting part of our lives, which I hope that doesn't come across as negative, because I do think it did a very good job, and it was very good, for what it was. It was good looking and convincing, but there's no need. There's nothing really personal to pull out of it other than, wow, that Mombi headless scene was really scary. So yeah, I just don't want to come down negative on it. We're positive, but there are some movies that just do their job, and we don't need to revisit them again and again. So. But that's another thing, talking about Neverending Story, right? Whether that is something to go back and revisit.
That's true. All right, then I guess let's get into it. Let's go ahead and watch the trailer for Neverending Story.
Okay.
What is the secret of this enchanted book? What wonders are hidden within its pages? What magical spell does it cast on all who read it? What is the secret of the never-ending story?
But that's impossible!
You will enter a world where a young boy's imagination becomes a vivid reality. The world of Atreyu and Artax, the Rockbiter, and a good and kind gnome. A world that is vast and eternal, treacherous and dazzling, unforgettable and free. For anyone who's ever made a wish, believed in a fantasy, or had a dream, this is the never-ending story.
Hey, Darin.
Yeah.
Look who it is. Look who it is.
It's Jason. I can't stand him. Hi, Jason. How you doing?
Doing great, doing great. I just had my daughter walk in. Give me a second. She wants to say hi.
Hi.
Okay, go.
We can set her up on a Zoom meeting if she wants it. I can send her an email and she can just join in.
You're a different one.
So, Jason,
The
when
world has ended. Her fork was broken.
Oh, all right.
Oh, sorry, Johnny. What was that?
when we graduated high school, you moved to California, and then the rest of us decided to take a trip to visit you. And during that trip, we went to Universal Studios, we went to the beach, we had a really good time. And on the way home, we were kind of documenting our trip. And on the way home, we got to the airport, and one of our friends turned to Darin and said, "Hey, Darin, did you have fun visiting Jason Payne in California?" And Darin turned to the camera and said,
"I hate Jason Payne. I hate him." Yeah, so it's good times. It was a good trip.
So that has kind of become like an inside joke between all of us. Whenever your name's mentioned, we all go, "I hate Jason." So
inside joke or just stone cold truth?
Either way, the feeling is mutual. I hate you guys. Can't stand you talking me into doing this.
Talked you into it. Didn't you beg us?
We want to thank you for coming on because we wanted to have a guest and we wanted to like see if we can make this work with our Zoom meetings and YouTube stuff with the guests. So you're our guinea pig. So thanks for coming on. And before we go any farther, tell us what movie you picked and why you picked it.
Well, I picked The Neverending Story from 1984. And the reason why is because it's every child's dream from that era to ride on a dragon and fly through the air and get revenge on bullies and have all the fantasy adventures that Atreyu had. So yeah, that's why I picked it.
Did you see it in the theater or did you see it at home? The first time you saw it, what was your experience like your first time you saw it?
Honestly, I don't remember. I don't think I went to see it in the theater, but I just remember watching it all throughout my childhood and saying, "Hey, that's an awesome movie," and I really think the Empress is hot. And so yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
So Darin, what about you? What was your first experience with this movie?
Well, I think I was talking with my wife as we were watching this again last night. I remember my first viewing of this movie in school. I was trying to figure out, because I know we saw it in the library. I was down on a carpet. We were watching it as a group, and I asked her, did we watch movies a lot when we were in school? And she said, yeah. I mean, when there was a snow day, we couldn't go outside. Teachers planned on us doing something and there was like reading days and things like that. So I distinctly remember watching this and getting really emotionally swept up in it in school, in elementary school. It must have been out on video or VHS. Everybody remember that, VHS? When that was on, 1986 is probably when I saw it. I did not see it in a theater. But yeah, that I distinctly remember lying on a carpet on my stomach with my head propped up, watching the movie and getting caught up in it. What about you, Johnny?
I saw it in a theater, and I saw it in a theater that's kind of well known where we all grew up in Orem, Utah, and a theater called the Sierra Theater. And they had this program every summer. They would have the Sierra movie, for the whole summer long. You could like buy these tickets and go watch these movies every weekend throughout the summer. And Neverending Story was one of those movies. And that's when I first saw it in that giant theater in the Sierra Theater in Orem. And I remember enjoying it. And one thing that sticks in my mind about the movie when I first saw it was what's the wolf's character's name? The wolf.
The Gamork.
Gamork. Yeah, the Gamork was something that stuck with me for some reason. I was kind of even, I would say, scared of him because it was kind of terrifying being, really young and watching that movie and seeing that moment in a dark movie theater. But I do remember enjoying it. But like I say, the Gamork character was what stuck with me.
Okay. You mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned this up top, but we grew up in Orem. I think we've known each other. When did we all meet? I think we all met on Time and Time Again, right?
Junior high school play. Yep. Time and Time Again, the play version of Back to the Future.
1992. And we've talked about that before, right, Johnny? We've talked about the play.
Yeah, we talked about it. It was kind of like a Back to the Future, like Jason mentioned. You were the George McFly character, and then Jason and I were the greaser characters that were kind of like the bully character.
Well, it was crossed with Grease, right? It was kind of a Back to the Future Grease kind of mix-up. So that kind of thing. So, and again, you guys were friends before that, right? I became friends with you guys during that play.
Yeah, Jason and I met when we were both I was in 5th grade and you were in 6th grade, I think, right, Jason?
Yep, we just lived down the street from each other, so it was a natural thing for you and I to start hanging out. And then we got into junior high school, and unfortunately, we came across this Darin guy.
I'm sorry. And we kind of became, how would you put it, either inseparable or we just couldn't get rid of each other. one of those things. But yeah, we grew up in Orem, and so I think, we've just been, there are 2 others that aren't here that were part of that group, our main core group of friends. But yeah, it was us going to see movies. It was us in plays. Jason, we had our Few Good Men episode, and we mentioned briefly that you and another friend were in a scene together, and you were that friend, correct?
That's correct. That was me.
Okay. And so we are kind of going on a tangent here away from Neverending Story, but I believe there's a story about you and I rehearsing A Few Good Men, and Johnny and I talked about it. We were like, well, Johnny said, I don't know if Jason wants to admit to that. So I'll leave it up to you, Jason. What's our connection with A Few Good Men? How did we do on that?
I guess you could call it a connection. Yeah. What happened was, at one point in our scene, I had to act like I was being restrained and lunge at you. And in order for me to get that feeling of being restrained, we had a couple of friends who, sad to say, they weren't as strong as males, and so they couldn't quite hold on to me when I lunged, and I got up in your face and got a little bit too close up into your face, and so yeah, you and I shared a tender little moment.
Right there. I can still feel your lips.
There's a literal connection. I really made a connection.
I guess I'm that good of a kisser then, I guess. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had better. I'm sorry to say it, Jason, but yeah, that was pretty special. So that, that's a connection that we had. And again, with movies, and it sounds like, we kind of had the same, we would get conversations about that stuff too, right? And it sounds like all of us are in the same boat with Neverending Story. It was kind of, I don't know, how would you describe it? It just, I don't know, we can go through it all, but Jason, how would you describe your connection to Neverending Story? What was it about the movie that you just liked?
Well, there was a lot about it, actually. Since I've been watching it over the last few weeks to get ready for this meeting, I realized that I related, and I have memories relating to different characters in the movie. The Bastion character, who's always got his head up in the clouds and using his imagination to live his life. Also, the Atreyu character, he was the adventurous dude that I always wanted to be, and was cool with his open shirt and riding a horse with the wind blowing and riding on a dragon, of course. And then even the Gamork character, combined with the Michael Jackson Thriller video, to instill in me an intense fear of wolves, especially wolves in the basement. So yeah, I connected with this movie throughout my life on various different levels, and I think I'm just now getting to realize that as we've prepared for this meeting. So yeah, that was why I liked it.
Jason, let me ask you this. How do you think it compares to other movies that are the similar genre, like the travel fantasy movies? How do they compare?
Well, you know what we mean by travel fantasy, right? You listened to our Return to Oz episode. Jonny, what were some of the movies that kind of connected with this, with Return to
Well,
Oz?
I would compare it to like Legend. I think, and we covered that on our podcast as well. Legend, Return to Oz, movies of a similar genre where it's a fantasy movie, but they have to go on this adventure. So, if there are other movies that you can think of that you've seen like that, how does this one compare to those ones?
To be honest, I actually don't remember those movies a lot. As far as the genre goes, this was the only one that I ever really connected with. I know I've seen the Return to Oz movies, but don't really remember much about them. I've seen screenshots recently about quote unquote the scariest sequel Disney ever made, and I don't know if that was the Return to Oz one, but I think it was.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I really don't remember those other movies, and so I couldn't really say how it compares. This was just the one in that genre that affected me profoundly as a child, and so yeah.
Right. And we talked about Labyrinth too, right, Jonny? This is weird because when I look at Jason, it looks like I'm looking at Jonny, because now I'm looking at Jason, but I'm obviously not. And so anyway, I'll try to maybe look straight. But Labyrinth we covered, and that's one that Jonny and I didn't connect with, right? And that would count. Wizard of Oz was another movie like that. Pan's Labyrinth, Alice in Wonderland, obviously. The one that, when Bastian in this movie goes to see the, what was his name? What's the name of the crotchety Coriander? Is that his name? The bookstore owner? Is that his name?
I don't know his name. The bookstore guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that reminded me of Last Action Hero for some reason. There's a part where the character Danny, there's the projectionist that kind of gives him the magic ticket that lets him launch into the world of Jack Slater, and so even that counts as one of those movies. I don't know, Jonny. How would you rank Neverending Story as far as those? What would you have a favorite of that genre?
I don't think I have a favorite, but I do see that it does compare. I think these movies, they kind of have these little moments they know they have to have. Like you have to have the character introductions. So you meet the rock batter, you meet the snail guy. What's the other guy's name? I forget his name already.
The Nighthawk.
Nighthawk.
Yep.
So you meet these characters. You have to have that. You have to have the different moments. Like you have the turtle, and then you have the what's the turtle's name? I keep getting names all of a sudden. What's the
Morla.
Yeah. Jason's got it. He's on top of it.
So you have that, and you have all these different moments, and it feels like they have to get to these certain scenes, and they have these things written out, and they know they have to get there, but they don't really explain how they get to that next, segment. So it's kind of episodic in a way. But anyway, so a lot of movies like this are similar to that, and so for me, it compared to those kind of movies. Like Legend was like that. What's the other one you mentioned? Oh, Labyrinth was like that. So I think it compares. I don't know if it's one of my favorites of that genre, though.
You don't think Neverending Story is not one of your favorites? That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I did have a pretty strong connection to the movie. I remember, like I said, having a connection to the movie as a child. It's when you, again, watching these movies for NostalgiaCast, when you go 20, 25 years without seeing them, and then you have kids and you're living in a different state, or you're a house owner and all this other stuff, it really hits you different. Watching it, watching it yesterday wasn't the first time I'd seen it recently. I think we watched it with the family like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and it was a different. Like you could see the seams. I don't know if that makes sense. I do think the thing with Atreyu is, I thought, when they call him to help save the Empress, it's like, of course it's a child, right? We latch onto these stories. We latch onto Alice. We latch onto Dorothy because we latch on to Danny from Last Action Hero because they're us, right? And that's why I just thought if there's a theme that stuck out to me this time, it would be, Jonny, we talked about Phantom Tollbooth. That was another one that's kind of like this. And it had the same kind of theme. It's if you're lazy and you've atrophied, and that you become swallowed up by the nothing, and you have no passion. And so you've got to stay focused. I think that was the point of this. It's not just, his dad comes in and says, keep your feet on the ground. It's, you want to have something that you're passionate about. You want to learn, you want to think, you want to have adventures. And so that was a connection with the Phantom Toll Booth that I felt. But as a kid, we latch onto this because that could be us. Atreyu could be us. Did the movie, I want to ask you guys, did the movie hit you different as an adult than when it hit you as a child?
Absolutely. To me, I mean, especially what you were just saying, watching this movie recently, I couldn't help but watch it as a parent. And so I could relate with the dad trying to get his son to, move on past his wife and the kid's mother's death, trying to get him to, be more connected with reality. Also, I noticed just little, I guess, safety violations. So like they keep the key to the attic right next to the attic door. And I was like, well, I don't think that would happen. But so yeah, I mean, I noticed all the little things. And I even noticed the drink that the dad made for himself while he was talking to Bastian, the orange juice and the egg. And I did a little bit of research. Why did people do that? And apparently if the egg is a little bit too ripe, it can turn into sulfuric acid. And yeah, it's not a good idea. So yeah,
I had a hard time on that when he's talking. The whole time he was talking, I was like, why did he put the egg in with the orange juice? So it kind of lost it. My wife was again, Elizabeth was watching with me. She said, well, the acid in the orange juice would cook the egg. It's kind of like an orange Julius. And I was like, well, I'm not drinking an orange Julius ever again. So I don't know. The stuff that, and I think me talking about the movie is at one point Elizabeth was like, I would have hated growing up with you because you just hate everything. It was the part where, oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on the horse's name. Jason, what's the horse's name? Artax. Specifically,
hey, I knew that.
Oh, okay, let's go back. Jonny, what's the name of the horse?
Artax.
Okay, got it. See, I knew it.
It's too late, Jonny. It's too late. That's so 5 minutes ago.
The scene that I remember most is that the horse, when he sinks into the what do they call that? I'm blanking on everything. I must be getting old. What do they call the swamp?
Sadness swamp, I think, something like that, or the swamps of
Swamp
sadness?
of Sadness.
Swamps of Sadness. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the first thing I thought when they show up at the swamp, I'm like, already? Is this the scene where the horse dies? I have no connection to this horse. Like, why? If this is the scene, I don't know why I got emotional. And so that's the first scene that I noticed. And when Elizabeth said, I would have hated growing up with you. The other thing too is when Artax is sinking because he's sad, shouldn't Atreyu have been sinking?
I had that same question. Yeah.
I guess I don't understand the rules of this. And so the problem was I kept going, wait a minute, hold on. Why isn't he singing? Wait a minute, hold on. Like, so those are some of the scenes that I noticed. Anything that you noticed, Jonny?
Yeah, come back to me. I had some, but come back to me.
Okay. Jason, were there any other scenes that you started to notice?
Well, you mentioned the Artax drowning in the swamps of sadness. That obviously was one of the things that traumatized me the most about my entire childhood. Was sure I didn't know enough about Artax now that I'm thinking about it to have an emotional connection with him, but it did affect me because Atreyu had the emotional connection with Artax, and that's why it affected me, was because it affected Atreyu. And I don't really consider myself to be like an emotional person as I'm watching movies. My kids are, and off topic, it's an amazing story watching movies with my kids.
Well, they take after your wife, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That answers that.
But yeah, I remember being profoundly affected, but not shedding a single tear over that. But I know other people who have said that they watched that movie and it was the one scene that ruined their childhood and made them have to grow up sooner than they wanted to, and so yeah.
Well, I think it's a horse, right? I mean, you just have a connection. It's a smart animal. It's probably pretty close, like a dog. It's pretty close to being human. It has thoughts and feelings, things like that.
Right.
So I like that point you made. It's because Atreyu had that connection that's what made you so sad. If it wasn't for Noah Hathaway's performance, maybe that scene just wouldn't have worked as well. Jonny, did you think of any sticking out points yet?
Yeah, I mean, I did notice this this time watching it, that the father has that, pep talk with him and before going to school, and then he gets bullied by the kids and hides in the bookstore. And then, the first thing he does is steal a book. So he steals a book, and then he goes to school and he sloughs school, skips the math test he's supposed to be, taking, he's supposed to be reminded to take. He skips that, sloughs school, and then doesn't go home. So then he's there all night long. So all these things that he's doing are things that would get you in trouble when you're a kid. And he just was told by his parent, don't do this, make sure you got your head on, out of the clouds and feet on the ground, all that stuff. But I was kind of like, so after that pep talk, he commits a crime, and then he sloughs school, and then he doesn't go home, so he could be considered a runaway. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like all these things that happened. I noticed that this time. As a kid, I didn't really pay attention to that kind of thing. But this time I was like, it was stuck out to me pretty big.
Because you're caught up in the adventure, right? But you don't think of that. That's funny. Like that hits me now. Is like if I was his dad, I would be like freaking out because, my kids do that all the time. You're like, how come you didn't take your test, or how come you didn't turn in your homework, or how come you were late? And they're like, I'm never late. And then like the next day you get a note from their teacher saying they were 15 minutes late. So it's like, I'm getting a different story from what you're telling me. So like from a parental point of view, like Bastian's a bad kid.
I know, right? See, that's my point.
And we have those conversations with our kids all the time. It's, look, you got to calm down. It's like, I get that you're young and you're got a lot of emotions and you're very passionate about stuff, but you've got to focus. You got to stop getting in trouble. There are more things in life than what you're doing right now. And so like you said, Jonny, I completely understand where the dad is coming from. Again, I was just too caught up in him drinking that egg and orange juice combo for that to really stick.
All right. Well, let's go on to the next thing. Let's go on to the world building. Jason, I'll ask you this. How did you think the world building went in the movie? Do you think it was believable, or do you think it didn't work, or that it did work? What do you think?
Are you talking about the part at the end where he has to make all the wishes?
I think he just means like everything, like world building in Star Wars. Like you have to know, Tatooine and the Empire. You have to. It's a world that you're creating, right? Is that what that's what Jonny meant, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think to start the movie, I just kind of accepted it as this world of Fantasia, all these different areas that it had. They were telling me about the world as the story progressed, and so just like with Star Wars, you just kind of accept that Tatooine is a thing, and Mos Eisley and whatever, all the other starports, whatever. But yeah, it was believable to me because I was being told a story, I think. So I don't know if that answers your question.
You think how they did it worked? I know it was like a lot of green screen was used in this. You think the green screen effects worked?
Well, I mean, as a movie that came out in 1984 to a child of that time, yeah, but looking at it now, it's a whole different story. I mean, I don't remember if you guys still do the should it be remade or not, but I think this one totally should be remade because of all the visual effects that can be done with it now. So.
Yeah, I agree. It should be made. And on our next episode of NostalgiaCast, no, I'm just kidding. Jumping the gun a little bit. I think with the world building, I still bought it. Like a lot of the emotions, like I kind of saw through everything. I believed in Fantasia. They kind of thrust you into it. You get to know Teeny Weeny, which Deep Roy, we just talked about him in Return to Oz. And how long has that guy been around? I know he's dubbed in this one, but Deep Roy's been around forever. So we get introduced, and it's quick shots of Teeny Weenies in your face, and the Night Hobbs in your face, and the Bat is in your face, and the Snail, just the way. And so you have no choice but to go along with it. But again, I think the thing we need to remember is this is Bastian imagining this world as he's reading it, right? So he's thrusting himself. Is that a problem for you guys? I've noticed, like, now, I don't know, this movie is very basic. It gives you the nuts and bolts, and just, there's the journey and everything, and there's nothing difficult about it. I mean, it's very, as a kid you can grasp it. Do you guys, is it hard for you mentally as an adult to imagine these worlds that you were able to imagine so easily as kids?
Well, I can still accept it, like you guys mentioned. I can accept the world they built. But as an adult, I'm finding all the mistakes and all the flaws in it. But to your point earlier, you mentioned how you didn't have enough relationship with the horse Artax, and so when he died, it didn't really affect you. What I wanted to have in this movie was a longer exposition and to get to know these characters for a longer amount of time before I was thrown into, the what do they call the tower? What do they call that tower?
The Ivory Tower.
Before you get there, I want to have more time with the Night Hob and more time with, what's the snail guy's name again?
Teeny Weeny is the snail guy's name, Deep Roy.
I just want to get to know them more. I mean, I liked the Rockbiter. The Rockbiter, you had a little bit more of a time to get to know him, but the other characters you didn't really get to know very well. It was too fast for me. So I wanted more of that. And I think I would have enjoyed it more and accepted it more had it been longer.
Yeah, I think the like I said, it's basic. Like, the characters just hit like a note that sets up what they are. I thought bringing up the Rockbiter, the part where they meet him later and he's sitting and he's depressed and he's looking at his hands and he's like, these look like big, strong hands. I tried to hold on as hard as I could, and I thought I could, but I lost them. And I thought, to me, that was an adult. It was very, very sad. I felt that more than I felt Artax dying. I don't know, just the way it was staged just seemed like there's a lot of scenes in this, like, like which one of you mentioned that it just seemed like you got from place to place without any, like, you kind of just jumped, right? There's a lot of that. Like, sometimes music would fade out and then it would cut in to another scene or, stuff like that. And so that kind of threw me off. But seeing the thing with the Rockbiter and his reaction, that just seemed like a very adult, sincere thing that was happening, and how he said, I'm just going to let it take me. It's like that depression sets in, and the laziness and the atrophy just kind of took him over. So I like that a lot. But Jonny, that's a good point. There isn't a lot of, you just accept it because maybe Bastian accepts it. I don't know.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't know. Jason, what do you think?
Well, I was just about to mention the last line that he said, just like you just did, about how he was so depressed and so saddened. And like you said, this was a very adult scene, grown-up scene, that he just let the depression and the sadness overcome him. I'm going to let this, the nothing's going to come and take everybody away. I'm just going to let it sit. I'm just going to sit here and let it take me away too. And yeah, I mean, as an adult, isn't there times in our lives that we all go through something like that? I mean, I know I personally have, and that's kind of another topic. But yeah, that was very moving scene for me. That wasn't so much when I was a kid because I didn't understand it. And now that I've been through life for these 40 some odd years, yeah, it hits home to me now.
Okay. And I think, like we were talking about with the seams, it was, I quieted down a little bit after Elizabeth said that. I was like, okay, I think I'm being a little bit too nitpicky. I don't want to do that. And so I tried to focus and get into it. And the scene with the Rockbiter, that's when I had an emotional connection with it. I liked that I was finally able to be inside the story. I think it's just the performance, I think is Alan Oppenheimer. He did the voice of the Rockbiter and Falkor and the Gamork, and he was the narrator. And so he did doing all those characters. I think he did a great job, and even the Gamork, Jonny, like you're talking about, it's the way that they shoot the Gamork, just, the eyes, you see him for the first time. It's very effective, I think, in the way they do that. What did you guys think of Falkor after all these years?
When I was a kid, I always thought his scales, the scales that were showing through the fur on his back, I always thought they were eggs. And so I thought it was really strange, but now I see it that there was actually scales, and they're just kind of like this iridescent pearly type color, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I would like to see this movie redone so that they could do a better job at animating the scales and creating that character.
Well, yeah,
That was
and
one of
even
the characters
like,
that I'm sorry, go ahead.
even the the animatronics and the way they moved the mouth of the dragon was like, it was always off with what you were hearing. So that, as a kid, always bothered me, and it bothered me as an adult as well. But yeah, I see your point, Jason.
Do you guys think the way that they have the practical effects, and I think with Falkor they had like 20 guys or something like that they were operating, and one person was the eyes, another was the nose, another was the mouth, another was the head movement, another was the tail. Was that more believable to you guys than like modern CGI would be? What's the difference?
The way I see that, I mean, they had so many guys working on the Falkor puppet. It's just hard to coordinate everything to make it look believable, and so I think that's why it bothered Jonny, and still does bother Jonny. And I can get that. I agree, really, to be honest. It's hard to connect with a character when the character looks so fake, and that's why I was saying that the Falkor character I really wanted to connect with, because it's cool, and so yeah.
What I want to mention about Falkor is I never understood why he had a puppy dog face. Like, what, it's a dragon, but he's got this puppy dog face. That always bothered me, and I still can't get over that. Like, why can't it still just be an actual dragon? If they're gonna make it a dragon, make it a dragon. It's like a half dog, half dragon thing. It's kind of weird.
So that's what we would call the definition of nitpicking, right? Now, I agree with you. Like, why does it look like a dog? Like, if I thought I still can't place it. The way that Falkor's face and the way he would smile, it reminded me of an actor, and I couldn't place it. Maybe it's just every like old age, 1950s actor that puts a mustache on and a goatee or something like that. But when you see, I was trying to look it up on the internet, like, who does Falkor look like? And they just showed pictures of Maltese dogs. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, he's a dragon that has a dog face. So yeah, I like the idea. I that was one of my notes. It's like, well, they try to have the mouth match and the facial expression. I like that they had the nose moving, and I like that the eyes would move. I like that the effort that they put into it. So to me, it's really no different from CGI, I guess. Like, CGI, it looks fake most of the time, unless it's like a golem from Lord of the Rings, unless it's Davy Jones from Pirates of the Caribbean, which are the exceptions for CG characters being like lifelike and very photorealistic. I know that it's fake, but I like the effort that they put into it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's how I felt about Falkor. The other thing about Falkor that I wanted to mention, Jonny, is there's a part where they go after the what's the amulet that Atreyu has? What's that called?
That is the Aaron? The Orin or Aaron?
Orin. When the Orin sinks into the water and Falkor dives into the water after it, and there's a part where you see Falkor's like head, just his head, just kind of float in. That reminded me of Jack Gillum in Clash of the Titans. Johnny, remember we talked about that, how he went to release the Kraken and it was the old guy like walking slow under the water. I don't know. That's what it reminded me of. I just thought it was funny. But yeah. The note that I have here that I was very proud of is that as lifelike as Falkor and the Gamork are, I thought Barrett Oliver, Bastion, I thought he had really expressive nostrils.
Yeah.
That kid had really big nostrils. I was like, wow, he is really acting a lot with his nose. I don't know.
It might have been because of the angle they were shooting, as him reading the book and him popping his head up and stuff. You were always kind of looking up his nose, so that might have been why you noticed that.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's funny. The animatronics in that kid's nose were just fantastic.
Okay, so let's talk about the theme real quick. What would you say the theme of this movie is, and did they accomplish setting a theme and all that?
Well, I think I kind of mentioned that before, right? It's like, if you just sit and you're lazy and you aren't passionate and you let your muscles just kind of, you aren't active, which is what, Is the dad, is that what he's saying? What is, setting aside the egg and the orange juice, what exactly is the dad as parents? What is the dad? What did you think the dad was actually saying to Bastian?
Well, I would say he's trying to get him to focus more on, he's in an age where he's supposed to start taking more responsibility. He's supposed to start growing up a little more, and he's still in that, wanting to be a child phase. So the dad's trying to get him out of that, get him into, you're starting to become more of a man, so I need you to start, taking more responsibility. That's what I got from it, which is something I tell my kids. It's like, hey, you're getting to the point where you got to start, doing more chores or helping out around the house more often, all that kind of stuff. So, but that's what I took from that.
What I think about the dad is that there's more to his desire to get Bastian to grow up than just getting him to grow up, because not only did Bastian's mother die, so did the father's wife. So he's grieving, and so there could be an aspect of, I guess, trying to act tough for his son, to help him deal with the loss of his mother and his wife. And so, yeah, I mean, it could be a motivation for him to get his son to focus less on the death in the family as a way of coping for himself.
Well, it's awkward, right? What do you say? Like, he's grieving. He knows his son is grieving. They're trying to have a connection. I think they were at least civil with each other. They weren't yelling. He is inattentive because the dad's got his own stuff that he's trying to, and so I don't blame him. I just think personally, there's a lot of people that take that. I mean, first of all, it's not really a talk. Like, it's weird. Like, what does he say? Like, put your feet on the ground, or I'm disappointed that you didn't try out for swim team. It's just these weird little mentions that he makes. But I think Bastian takes, Bastian says at the end, when he realizes that he's part of the story, and the childlike empress is trying to get him to be involved, and he's like, no, I have to keep my feet on the ground. He's trying to be responsible, but he learns a different kind of responsibility. He takes charge of this world instead of just approaching it lackadaisically. Johnny, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see that. I guess, jokingly, I would say the theme is, if you ever find yourself become part of a fantasy novel, make sure that you, save the fantasy world by screaming some hippie name into the wind. That's the theme for me, anyway.
Moonchild, right? Yeah. Like, I think Dweezil Zappa, like Frank Zappa, named one of his kids Moonchild. Yeah. So I would say the theme to me personally is that it's don't be lazy, is like take responsibility, have the imagination, like take charge, that kind of thing. My question is, how well does this movie get that across, if that's the theme? Or Johnny, your idea of the theme, how well do you think that the movie gets that point across to us in the audience?
Well, I think it works for kids. I think kids will latch onto that, and they will get inspired by that. I don't think as an adult it inspires me or wants me. It doesn't come across to me as an adult as well as it did as a kid. Because my son, he felt like motivated and inspired after watching this movie, and so I think they accomplished that, and I think kids, like I say, will latch onto that.
So I appreciated that you mentioned the imagination aspect of it, because that's the word that popped into my mind when Johnny asked the question, what the theme is for the movie. I think it's the message of the movie is to the kids, in that don't lose sight of your imagination. That is a powerful force in you, and if you can develop it, that's going to be really good for it. So imagination, I would say, is the theme of the movie.
Okay. I do think that Bastian imagines this world better than the grandson does in Princess Bride. I don't want to say that Princess Bride is a lesser movie. I think Princess Bride is much, much better than this as far as humor and sincerity goes from beginning to end. But like we were talking about earlier with the world building, there are shots in there that I bought the world of Fantasia. Like, I bought that this is, and again, you're kind of detached from, and it's like, that's an interesting point. And maybe that's something we want to talk about, is as a kid, you really connect with this. But then when you jump ahead a couple decades, you kind of side with the adultness of it. And so maybe that's like we talked about with Big, it's just as an adult, you start noticing different things that you didn't, you notice the fun stuff when you're a kid. I just think, but then there are other things in it that you notice as an adult. I just think that's powerful. As a kid, this movie works as a kid. And would you guys consider that a success? Because I know it doesn't work as well for us now as what we've been talking about, but as a kid, that the message and the world building is very strong. How do you guys feel about that?
Thumbs up.
Okay. Jonny, what about you?
Yeah, I think that definitely works. So while we're here, let's go ahead and go through the what's remake. Jason, you already mentioned you think it's worth a remake. So go a little bit more into detail of why you think it needs to be remade, or why you think that.
Well, aside from all the characters that I felt could have been made strong, I guess, wasn't that the reason why George Lucas didn't want to make the later Star Wars movies, because the technology didn't exist back then? I don't know. But
Yeah, I'm so glad he waited for that technology to come around.
Yeah. Aside from all of that, though, just like you guys have been mentioning, there are so many other stories involved in this movie that could have been there that weren't, and I think that we can get a lot more from it, from not only seeing it more visually, but also experiencing it more on like a social level with all these other characters. And so that's why I think it would be a good remake.
Okay. Darin, you want to go next?
Yeah, I like I said, I really didn't have a strong connection with this movie. I think it's fine for what it is. I think as a kid, being able to connect with it, maybe that's the point, and it did its job as a child. Besides the rock biter, his depression thing, what I really liked at the end is, we kind of project ourselves onto these characters, and we project ourselves onto Atreyu, and then we project ourselves into Bastion. I like that they involve Bastion. That from the beginning, they're like, we need to get a human child. It's Bastion that's involved. And then later when they're talking, the childlike Empress says, just like he's watching us, there are people that are watching him. And it's a story that's going to go on. I like the title that it's Never-Ending Story when it actually ends, at the end. And the novel that this was based on, it only went through a half of the book. The name of the guy that wrote the book here, Ende, that wrote it, it only goes halfway, and then the whole point is like, if Bastion doesn't involve himself in the story, it's just going to go on again and again, and that's why it's called the Never-Ending Story. I like that aspect of it, and I think it's good for what it is. It accomplishes it. So I would say it's worth remembering, because as a time capsule, it works on you as a child, but as an adult, and it's fine. I don't feel badly about it one way or the other. You can talk about the look of the movie being kind of grungy, and it's not the best looking movie in the world. A lot of stuff is very point and shoot or not very stylistic, which isn't necessarily a problem. But as an adult now, the movie that I would say I attach myself more to now is Pan's Labyrinth, because that's a more adult take on this very same story. And it's like the next evolution of Return to Oz even. It's like, Jonny, you and I talked about Return to Oz, that it's an ugly movie, but is it ugly because Dorothy, this is the only way she can imagine the world, because that's how her world is, and so she doesn't have the imagination. And so at the end of that movie, she's able to see in bright colors again, and she gets that back. Pan's Labyrinth is the same thing. It's more nightmarish than Return to Oz, and it has more terrifying creatures, and the connective tissue of the movie, the real life stuff that goes on with the general and everything like that, is horrifying. And so Pan's Labyrinth is a movie that I would focus on, that it speaks to me now, but I don't want to take away with what Never-Ending Story accomplished on me as a child. Does that make sense? So
yeah, so you're saying worth remembering, though, right?
Yeah, worth remembering. If I say it's worth a remake, I agree with Jason. Like, you could do it better in this way. I just think that there have been other movies that they've made that leave Never-Ending Story alone. I know that Leonardo DiCaprio wanted to redo this and try to get the rights to Ende's book, but it was fine for what it was. It accomplished what it needed to accomplish. Like, there are other stories out there now that our kids can attach ourselves to, and that we can watch with our kids, that we would have a stronger attachment to. So I don't want to take away from it, but I also, it has been remade already, and so there are just other movies you can watch instead of watching this one.
Okay. Well, yeah, like you guys, I'm a little bit torn with this one because I did respond to it as a kid. I did like it back then. I would say that it should be worth remembering for me. But watching it again as an adult, I had a really hard time not criticizing everything I was seeing. I had a hard time with it this time for some reason. And I was noticing all the mistakes. And so it was kind of bothering me as I was watching. I wanted to get over with. I wanted to just get through it. So for that reason, I want to see it remade, because also I think they could flesh out the characters. We'd have more exposition. We get to know these characters more. We could have a longer movie where it takes you on a journey. They explain how they get from place to place. They don't just jump to the next scene they wanted to get to. And but overall it was good, and I appreciate it for what it was back then. So as a kid, I would say worth remembering. But as an adult, I would say it's worth a remake.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've been talking about as children, that it's very strong and there's an emotional pull that it has, but you just I guess reach an age where that's no longer an issue. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any last thoughts? That I'm looking over my notes now. I know that the scene with the gnomes or whatever, Engi, Wook, and Urgle, that reminded me of Miracle Max.
Yeah.
Like as soon as they come out, I was like, I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. That's immediately what I thought of. But again, there's that scene where they go and they look in the telescope at the sphinxes, and the way that they're able to do the forced perspective, where it looks like the gnome is smaller than Atreyu. I thought that was very effective. I liked that. That was a special effect that I enjoyed.
The one thing that I noticed was the Arin is actually Ouroboros. It's actually like two snakes eating eating their own tail. So it's kind of like these two snakes intertwined eating the tail, which is, a sign for infinity or eternal or whatever. And so I didn't catch that as a kid because I didn't know, what it meant. But as an adult, I was like, oh, that's Ouroboros. That's a snake eating its own head or eating its own tail. So
yeah,
which makes sense with this title, Never Ending Story.
Yeah,
it's never ending.
Endless loop, right? Jason,
Yeah.
any other thoughts that you just want to mention that we haven't talked about?
Not so much that we haven't talked about. I think you mentioned before how your wife Elizabeth mentioned that she would have hated growing up with you, and I think that's why I love her so much, because I did kind of grow up with you and I hated it. So,
so that's the thing that connects us. It's just our mutual hate for each other, right? I think that's very. I'm glad we have that connection, even without the kiss. But yeah, I mean that's I think that's our thoughts on Neverending Story. It's like and Jason, I guess we didn't really beat him because I came down worth remembering, but then Jonny did both. You evened out, right? Always the peacemaker. You always have to.
All right, well, Jason, thanks for joining us, man. It was fun to see you again and fun to talk about this movie with you.
Yeah,
did you enjoy doing that? Actually, watching the film and kind of what we do on this podcast. Did you enjoy kind of revisiting that movie and experiencing it all over again as an adult?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that one of the reasons why I like the show, I have to mention it, Stranger Things. One of the reasons that Stranger Things I liked it so much is because they redid this theme song. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but that's one of the big things at the very last episode of their most recent season, is they redid the theme song and they're just kind of doing a sing-along with it. But, and yeah, that's exactly what I did as a kid. I would sing that song and just kind of live in the memory of it. So it was a lot of fun doing this.
Good. That's really what we try to do, right? And hopefully, I don't know if anybody's still watching. I know that Jason's tough to listen to and to look at. If anybody's still around, feel free to comment and let us know what you think. Is the emotional pull still just as strong, or have you not watched it in 20, 25 years? And so I think that's the other thing too, is it's healthy, but it's not healthy at the same time to attach ourselves too much to nostalgia. But it's also not very healthy to write it off as nostalgia, because there are very positive things to take away from the feelings we had watching these movies as a kid. I don't think, even though our opinions on the movies might differ, I don't think it's fair to kind of write those off and trivialize how we felt about them when we were younger. So hopefully that's what we're getting across here. And so, Jason, I'm glad you're able to. It's good to see you. I know we joke around a lot, but yeah, we got to meet halfway in between states because we're all in different places right now.
Yeah. 3 different time zones, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Jonny, you should be in bed. I should be off to bed. Jason, you should be having dessert.
No,
all right, Jason,
I'm 43 years old. I need to be going to bed now. So.
Oh, okay. That's right. What am I doing up? Jonny, what are you doing up?
I work nights, so I'm always up.
Okay.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
You're a little too heavy, buddy. Yeah! We're going down. Yeah!
Okay, so that was our discussion on Never-Ending Story with our special guest, Jason Payne. We want to thank Jason for being a part of it. That was a lot of fun. Visiting Jason again and seeing how he's doing. So thank Jason for all that. But anyway, go ahead, Darin. What is the outro topic for tonight? What are we going to talk about?
Well, I thought it was interesting. One of the things we mentioned, Wolfgang Petersen directing this movie. Watching the movie again, I just thought that was really weird because I wouldn't have pegged the guy that did Das Boot or In the Line of Fire or Air Force One as directing this movie. And so it got me thinking about other movies. Like there are certain directors that we admire or that the industry admires that are a big part of pop culture. But every now and then they direct a movie that just isn't them. I'm not saying that. I think it was too early in Petersen's career to really judge that, although Das Boot is a very, very tightly controlled and I would say like a kind of a masterpiece of tension. And so seeing him tackle like a children's movie was different, but I don't know if he was late enough in his career to really say, wow, that was really off the mark. It's not like when we talked about Peter Jackson in our Frighteners episode about how Frighteners kind of threw him off the trajectory of doing all these gory comedies and then all of a sudden switching to Heavenly Creatures being a very respectable Oscar-worthy drama, but it still had its weirdness. And go ahead, sorry.
And then Lord of the Rings after that, like he just kind of like kept going in the right direction after that.
Yeah, and so the Frighteners just in there, just to go back to his gory days, just kind of was weird, even though we did come down kind of positive on that movie. So again, that got me thinking about other directors that we admire and some of the movies that you're like, what? He directed that? And so I sent you a list. Actually, I sent you the topic before I even had my list, and you sent me like a list like immediately, which was impressive. Like you've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean the first one I sent you was one that I've always thought was just like, what is that doing in this filmography? Why is that one of the movies that he decided? I know why, and we'll talk about that, but it just doesn't fit with everything else he's done in his career. And this is Guy Ritchie that I'm talking about. But do you want me to go ahead and go with the first one?
Yeah, since you opened the door, let's go ahead. What Guy Ritchie movie are you talking about?
Well, I mean, we know Guy Ritchie and love him from Lock, Stock, Smoking Barrels, and we love him from Snatch and, obviously the Sherlock Holmes movies. But when he married Madonna, he went ahead and did this movie Swept Away. And it just doesn't fit with everything else that he's done. And I remember watching it, thinking I was going to get a Guy Ritchie movie. I don't know why I thought that. And then I got this boring, like just this, I don't know, I thought it was just ridiculous. And I was like, what? I mean, like I said, I know why he did it. He married Madonna. It was a passion project for her, most likely, and it was probably something they did together. And whatever, I'm okay with that. But as a movie as a whole, I thought it was just terrible. And when I go see a Guy Ritchie film, I want to see, the action and the quirkiness and the clever filmmaking that he's known for.
Yeah, it seemed more like a vanity project of look how beautiful my wife is and the various stages of undress that I can get her in, which, good husband, I guess. But yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't really fit in with Snatch, especially. That's weird. That's a weird mismatch of movies. So go ahead.
Hold on. The other movie that he's done recently was Aladdin, and also kind of doesn't really fit either, even though it's, you know, big budget movie, it still doesn't really fit with what he's known for.
Well, we won't. That's a whole can of worms. It's weird being married to Madonna and somebody that makes music videos. It's weird that the musical sequences in that movie would be so inept. There are parts that are sped up that so they can fit like where they need to be at their next, next line that they're supposed to hit or next note.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, anyway, I don't want to go down that road. We'll be talking about a completely different thing. So the first title that I picked was Dune by David Lynch, 1984. One of the things, again, with these directors, I'm really big on a director showing his personality. I believe it was Andrew Sarris that kind of came up with this idea that it's the director that should be the main focal point of a movie, who should make all the decisions. Everybody should kowtow to his point of view. And that unfairly kind of assigns the praise to the director when there are writers that work with them. There are lighting people, there are the production designers, there's the cinematographer. To focus on the director is unfair. But I do believe that a director should be the guiding voice of a movie. I always love it better when you can tell that it's a certain director. Like when you go to see a David Fincher movie, you expect there to be a certain aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to see David Fincher do like a Marvel movie. That wouldn't. You don't want to see him go for the generic type filmmaking. And so with David Lynch, having, we know him from Blue Velvet, we know him from Eraserhead. He did Elephant Man right before Dune, and so this name comes up again. Dino De Laurentiis, who bought the rights to Flash Gordon. It's weird that these foreigners would come in and buy these American projects or products and try to make them their own, but then enforce their own vision on those movies. So instead of, this is what I think it should be. When you don't live in this country or you didn't grow up on that, you just think that with Dune, De Laurentiis wanted a Star Wars. And so he went after Lynch because of Elephant Man. And Elephant Man is a movie that fits into David Lynch's filmography, but it's a very prestigious movie, but it's also weirdly shot, so it looks and feels like a David Lynch movie. Dune, I think, is such an expansive novel, like Lord of the Rings, that you can't make it a Star Wars. That's not what it is. And so having David Lynch, it's kind of like when we talked about Tim Burton and Batman. Like, why would you hire this guy who's a visionary director and then clamp down on him and make him do what you want him to do instead of it being like a David Lynch movie? And so this movie's notorious for all the production troubles, and there was a 4-hour cut that they whittled down to 2 hours, and a lot of it's unintelligible. I think the problem when you cut a narrative down like Dune into a 2-hour chunk, you take away what's attractive of that story in the first place. When you do exposition and you're trying to cut 100 pages down to 5 minutes of screen time, you're not going to be able to convince people of why I should like this. A lot of people aren't familiar with Dune like they're familiar with Star Wars. So you're not going to be able to convince people to believe in this world of Dune if you truncate it. You know what I mean? And so, yes, there's the weird stuff. It has the boils on faces. Kyle MacLachlan is obviously in the movie for a little bit. There's a lot of the Lynchian touches. But at the end of the day, it's just a generic sci-fi movie. And I think because not enough of his personality shows through, that
I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't last. It didn't convince people, and so Dune was my first choice. What was your second choice?
Second choice was the movie Snake Eyes by Brian De Palma. And I typically like Brian De Palma. I know, Carrie, Untouchables, Scarface, Carlito's Way, a good one I like. Mission Impossible, you know what I mean? He's done some really good work. And then I saw the movie Snake Eyes when it came out. And he had this idea to shoot the movie at a fight, a boxing match, and then never show the match, never show the fight. And so it's really kind of odd to watch this movie take place where you never see what the crowd is looking at, what the actors are looking at, what they're watching. And I understand having those ideas and wanting to try out those experimental filmmaking ideas and whatever and see if it works. But I don't think it worked. It was too frustrating for me to watch this movie and not get a chance to see what the characters are seeing. I kept wishing to see what they were seeing, and I kept being annoyed that the camera wouldn't turn around. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that were happening while I was watching it that were just this is weird. And also, it was almost too weird. You know what I mean? I just want, if you just made that movie and not been stuck to those rules and guidelines, I think it would have been a better movie.
Okay. Well, you know that De Palma is well known. I mean, he's a very visionary, and he's got a lot of visual flourishes in his movies. I know that the movie opens with like a 10-minute, like uninterrupted camera take, which is impressive. I remember sitting in the movie theater, and he covers the cuts with swish bands and things like that. But I just thought it was weird. The camera work was, and so I got excited those first 10 minutes of that movie. But then the story became like a generic mystery murder thriller, and so the story was like, your visuals don't match the perfunctoriness of this story. This story is very rote and it's lame. It's not like Michael Mann directing Collateral. I think Collateral with Tom Cruise, I think that's a very generic story. But Mann was able to shoot it in a way that made it exciting, even though you'd seen that story dozens of times before.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to have a De Palma movie and have it look like that. You know what I mean?
I mentioned this too. The one thing I like about De Palma is he doesn't seem to be stuck to one certain genre, and I think that's impressive for directors to be able to jump genres like that. We talked about Guy Ritchie, having a certain style and everything, but he's pretty much stuck in a genre. You know what I mean? Like he does that crime genre really well. But I think Tarantino also is kind of stuck in that, I think. But like De Palma is not stuck in that. And so I kind of really respect him for that. But I think when he tried this experimental thing with this movie, it just didn't work. For me, anyway.
Yeah, he has his ups and downs. Okay, so the second one I chose, we won't want to talk to it too much, but For Love of the Game from 1999, the Kevin Costner movie. Sam Raimi directed this thing, and you and I are big Raimi fans. When you watch a Sam Raimi movie, you know it's a Sam Raimi movie. As corny or as cheesy or as fake looking as they can be, like Army of Darkness is very fake looking, but it's very fun to watch. I mean, it's supposed to be comedic, right? To have him direct a baseball movie with Kevin Costner. Again, the story is nothing new. It's just about this, this pitcher that pitches a perfect game, and the whole time he's pitching, he's thinking about his life and his relationship with his girlfriend and how he's let her down, and does he really need to keep. So it's a fine story, but to have Sam Raimi, it's weird. Like, baseball is not something I would associate with Sam Raimi. Sam Raimi's very inventive camera work wise. He's very flamboyant in the way he shoots things, and that's not how you shoot baseball. Like, baseball is very, it's American. It's apple pie. It should be shot. And I don't have any arguments about baseball movies, but I don't think there's a way to shoot a baseball movie other than being generic and showing the game for what it is. So it's a weird mix having Raimi in there, especially because when you watch the movie, like if you told me Sam Raimi directed it after I watched the movie, I'd be like, what? Like, there was nothing in the movie. Maybe there's some camera work, but it's not recognizable. It's really generic as a movie. Again, I'm really, really big, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know you're not a huge fan of it, but the movies that I'm a fan of in that franchise are the movies that are personal, that they've given the director free reign, and they said, you do what you need to do, and they let him, like Ryan Coogler doing Black Panther, that movie has a voice. It's not just the generic connect the dots to other Marvel movies. Even, Joss Whedon's Avengers movies, that's Joss Whedon. Like, you listen to the dialogue, that's him. Like, the way he paces things, that is. Even Age of Ultron, which is a very convoluted mess of a movie, it's still infinitely more interesting to me than any of the more solid Marvel movies. Because those Marvel movies, which I don't want to detract from, they're fun to watch, right? But and the characters are likable, the humor's good, the story beats, you expect them. But I just like a movie, Taika Waititi directing Thor Ragnarok, James Gunn directing the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Those are the ones that I adore because I can sense it's a director and not a committee directing it. So that's, with Sam Raimi, For Love of the Game is not a terrible movie, but for Raimi to direct that, it's kind of like, okay, maybe he wanted to scratch some kind of itch, but there's no sign in the movie, for me anyway, that that's a Sam Raimi movie.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So your third movie, what did you pick?
Okay. Number 3 for me is The Limey, Steven Soderbergh. And Steven Soderbergh is hit or miss with me. I first took notice of him when I saw Out of Sight. And again, it's, you know, Elmore Leonard novel, and I think it was really well done. Funny characters, funny dialogue, and I like those kind of stories. So that appealed to me. And I thought, oh, I gotta find out what this guy. I started following Soderbergh to see what he would do next and see what was going on with him, because I kind of wanted more of that. And then we got, I think, what came next? What was the last? It was Traffic, right? Traffic.
Yeah, Traffic is 2000.
Traffic was okay. I remember thinking it was pretty good, but it kind of introduced that whole, you know, shaky cam thing that he became, you know, later on started doing a lot more of, and so that not really turned me off, but I kind of went, okay, what's happening here, you know? And I forgave it because I thought it was, you know, still a pretty decent movie. And then the movie The Limey, it was again an experimental idea that he had where the characters would look at each other and you'd hear the dialogue, but they wouldn't say anything. Their mouths wouldn't move. So you would see the characters, you know, looking at each other and just be back and forth coverage of the characters' faces, but you hear the dialogue, and it was just weird. I just didn't think it worked, and it was just. But it wasn't always like that. There were scenes where they did talk, and it was like a normal movie. And then sometimes they wouldn't talk to each other; they just look at each other, but you still hear the dialogue. So it was like, what is going on? This is so weird, and so that didn't work for me. And then, you know, he's done some movies too that I don't like Solaris and Ocean's 12 and The Girlfriend Experience. So he's, like I say, he's hit or miss with me. But that one for sure stands out as a movie that doesn't really fit with his filmography and what he's done in the past. Is The Limey. Just too weird, too experimental.
Right. Okay. I think that's what Soderbergh is kind of known for, the quirkiness. But then with Traffic and then with Ocean's 11, I think he kind of hit like a Hollywood blockbuster phase. And again, we have nothing but positive things to say about Ocean's 11. Ocean's 12 is a different story, but Ocean's 11 is a very Hollywood glossy, you know, star-studded movie, and it's great. It's fun to watch. You just kind of get lost in that. And again, that's the thing with, you know, we watch these directors, like some directors like Christopher Nolan, like Memento is very unique and idiosyncratic, and you're just excited, what's this guy going to do next? David Fincher is very interesting because you know you're going to get something. It was exciting for about 2 or 3 movies there when Shyamalan came out, you know, after, you know, you had the 1, 2, 3 punch of Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and Signs, and you're just like, this guy is a voice, like, where can he go? And then it was nothing but downhill from there. And so, you know, we have these directors that we latch onto that's increasingly rare these days because, again, everything is going towards the franchise filmmaking route. Yeah. People just want comfort, which I understand in these trying times and these scary world that we're living in. You just want something you can go to and you expect, this is what I want. I want to be able to laugh, and I want to be able to forget about it. I want to forget about the world, and then when the movie's over, I want to be able to forget about the movie. That's what I want. So I understand that. My last movie, and this one infuriated, it's probably one of the worst experiences that I've had, was Jack from 1996. Okay. So, and speaking of directors, this is Francis Ford Coppola we're talking about. The man. This guy had the string of movies that he had. He had The Godfather, The Godfather 2, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now. Those are 4 movies that were instantly part of the lexicon. That was a voice. And I would argue, like The Outsiders, Rumblefish, there was an extended cut of The Cotton Club that just came out. You know, these movies, that's the man. Francis Ford Coppola had, you know, a style, and he was very strong narratively and very strong stylistically. And then he just lost his way, I think. And maybe the studios kind of, you know, crushed his spirit a bit. So to see him, to go from The Godfather to this movie about this child who has a degenerative disease where he ages really fast, and it's just so generic. The problem, we've talked about Robin Williams before. I think Jack is like the anti-Big, because talking about Big, seeing what Tom Hanks did and the nuances and how quiet his performance is, it's not the definition of broad. In Jack, this is Robin Williams at his worst. You know, rank this with Patch Adams or with Toys. Just movies where the director has no control. It's like, oh, I've got Robin Williams. I don't know what to do. I'll just let him do what he does. There's a difference between watching Robin Williams do stand-up and watching him just have free reign on a movie set. And so there's a literal scene where they're, you know, he and his kid friends, they're farting into a can, and it's it's Robin Williams. It's not him doing a performance. It's just Robin Williams. And you're like, and just the themes of it, you know, him trying to ask out Jennifer Lopez as his teacher, or hitting on Fran Drescher, and there's that whole sexual game thing there. It's just handled with such sledgehammer force that it boggles my mind that it's Francis Ford Coppola directing that. How far from the tree? I just don't understand what the point of making that movie was. Did we see that together? In a theater?
I want to say you did. Yeah, I remember seeing that in the theater with you. Yeah, we saw it.
Do you remember our reaction to it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of the same reaction we had when we saw, what was that, Junior with Arnold Schwarzenegger? We walked out of that kind of just going, what the heck? What was that? It was kind of the same reaction that we had with that one.
Yeah, it was weird from the start, and it's just, there's no nuance to it. They go for the easy laugh every time. The thing with Big that we liked, it was always situational comedy. The comedy came from the characters. It was very honest. To have Robin Williams as a big hairy adult walk into a room and see a child-sized desk, and that he walks toward it to sit down, where is that joke going to go? That's like, you know, that's like Jay Leno jokes. It's like you can see the punchline coming from a mile away. I just don't understand how the director of The Conversation and Apocalypse Now and The Godfathers, I don't know. It crushes my soul.
Yeah, he definitely was slumming for some reason. Or
Yeah.
he had to. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's probably a reason behind it.
But then he did The Rainmaker the next year, which I think is one of the better John Grisham adaptations. So I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. Obviously, The Rainmaker isn't in the same league with The Godfather still, but, you know, at least it's not Jack. I don't know. Just terrible.
All right. Well, cool. Well, again, for NostalgiaCast, hey, hold on a minute here. Do I need to talk about what we're doing next time?
That would be helpful. I think you did this last time. I think you were like, yeah, let's just get out of here. I'm like, whoa, no. What you did is you started cutting to the next segment before we started talking about whether it's worth remembering or worth remembering.
Yeah, I'm always one step ahead. That's what it is. I'm one step ahead.
You're like Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes. You're yeah. What are we talking about next time?
Right. Well, you picked Return to Oz, and then Jason picked Neverending Story. And since we had a little break there, I'm going to go ahead and take the next one. And I'm going to do Short Circuit.
Oh, okay.
It's also a 1980s movie. I'm not quite sure what year it was. I know it was somewhere in the early 80s.
85. We'll do our research. We'll find out.
I have a lot of fond memories of this movie, so I want to go ahead and revisit it and see how it holds up.
Okay. So, try to get a grip on the Fisher-Stevens uncomfortable playing in Indian vibes.
Steve Guttenberg and Ali Sheedy, too, so it'll be fun.
Steve Guttenberg, he was a big star. When they cast him as Captain America. Anyway, yeah. Okay, that's a good one. Next Short Circuit. That's definitely on a list. So let's talk about that. Next time.
Now let's do the ending.
Okay. All right, and go.
I am Jonny Craddock.
And I'm Darin Lundberg.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.